Hello friends, welcome back. My name is Jason, and in last week's video, we discussed the possibility of stockpiling being a dangerous activity. Should you stockpile or should you not stockpile? Stockpiling could potentially make you a target to those people that have not prepared and do not have the supplies necessary to provide for their families. The government could potentially make stockpiling illegal. And I've heard this before, and I've looked into it. I've done a little bit of research on this subject, and I think that there's some validity to it. Like there are 3 times, for example, in history, in U.S. history, where it has been basically illegal to own gold in any quantities more than like jewelry of sorts, like gold coins and bullion and stuff like that. It's been illegal to have that. I am no historian. Do your own research. Feel free to correct my history, the dates, the times, all these things. The details, specific details like that, don't interest me that much. 3 times in history where the U.S. government has seized gold. And that was the War of 1812, the Civil War, and the Great Depression. It was basically illegal to own gold in any quantities other than some jewelry, basically. Now, did they confiscate it? What I remember reading, especially during like the Great Depression, it wasn't necessarily confiscated. You were required to turn it in and you received payment of some sort. I forget what it was exactly. Tell me in the comments what it was. You received payment for that. So it's not like the government stole it from you. They paid you for it, but they paid people a far less than market value for that gold. So basically they stole it. That was just a way of getting around the thievery. I've read a bunch of articles from different, prepper sites and prepper websites and things like that and watched some videos. And a lot of people, I think, worry about stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be worried about. 1, because it's probably nothing you could do about it if it was to occur. 2, it may or may not be true. Like, for example, 50 U.S. Code 4512. Look this up, do your own research, read it yourself, interpret this the way that you like. It's talking about hoarding scarce materials. What is the definition of scarce materials? That is up for debate, and that is up for the president to decide, basically, if you can trust his judgment on anything. I don't know if I trust his judgment on which toilet paper I should buy. Basically, what U.S. Code 4512 says is that nobody should accumulate more than they can realistically use for their own personal uses or your business use. If you, obviously if you have a grocery store, you should be able to accumulate enough to stock the shelves of the grocery store, right? But nothing more than that. If you're an individual, a person that just eats out of your pantry and your fridge, you shouldn't have more than that. You shouldn't have an excess of that. And if you do, you could potentially be considered a hoarder, and those items could be potentially taken from you and redistributed elsewhere. Where would they be redistributed to? I don't know. Who decides these things? Powers that be would decide these things. I worked for the government, and I know firsthand how loose the government spends and how wasteful the spending is. The decisions that get made on where money goes, where resources go, is absolutely ridiculous. And I could give you some very specific examples, but I might get in trouble for that, so I'm not going to do that. I don't trust government entities, whoever they may be, to redistribute things effectively. I am responsible for me, I'm responsible for my family, my immediate community, my friends, those people. That's who I'm responsible for, and that's who I take responsibility for. I'm not sitting on some huge mountain stockpile of anything. That's definitely not the case. But who is there to decide? Who's going to decide if, my situation, who's going to decide because I have, 10 pounds of rice and beans sitting on my pantry if that's hoarding because it's, it's too much for me and my family to eat in a week. Another example signed by Kennedy was Executive Order 10998, and this basically gives the government control over agriculture. Privately owned, publicly owned, government owned, doesn't really matter. They can decide where those agricultural resources can be used and distributed. The food that gets produced on them, the machinery, tractors and all the stuff, combines, all that stuff can be used to support whatever initiative the government wants to be supported. So if we go to war, whether it be foreign or domestic, armies have to eat, right? So, what is the saying? An army marches on its stomach. Without resources, proper nutrition, an army's not going to go anywhere. So I understand the logistics behind something like that. And if there was, let's say, an invasion in the U.S. Here locally, the military would have to get their resources from somewhere. And the government stockpiles are only so big. And if those are depleted, then they're going to have to search elsewhere to continue feeding that force. They're going to have to reach out to privately owned sectors to get the resources that they need. So in a disaster relief type situation, FEMA pulls from their own stockpiles, basically, if I understand this correctly. They pull from their own stockpiles and they use the resources that they have in storage to supply the resources that the people need in a disaster situation in that area. Now, if those resources are completely depleted, they'll probably go to more industrial, large manufacturing, distribution type plants, larger places that have a lot of stuff. They'll reach out to them probably first. And if those are depleted, then what? Then they're probably going to start reaching out to the local people in the surrounding areas. Now, I don't understand exactly how that would go down if government agencies, name it, whatever 3-letter government agency you want to talk about, was going door to door and raiding your pantry. I don't think that's going to go very well, and I think that would cause quite a few problems. If you're in an area where people are struggling to get by and to make ends meet, and then you've got people in uniforms going door to door trying to collect supplies for something else, whether you support it or not. I might be all for the U.S. military protecting the homeland here. I'm all about that. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I don't want people parachuting down into my lawn from a different country and attacking my family. I'm not into that, and I would be all about supporting the U.S. government and its initiative to stop that. But if we're already struggling and let's say supplies are limited and my family needs to eat, I'm going to be pretty hesitant to hand over further supplies, whether it's a, presidential order or whatever. It's not really going to matter to me. What matters to me is taking care of my family and my family's needs. That's priority one. The president could declare a national state of emergency for anything and everything. It doesn't really matter. There's whatever they feel like is an emergency. They could just say it happened, and now suddenly they can enact all these executive orders that could bypass a lot of the checks and balances. I think that that's a scary thought for a lot of people, but I think realistically, I don't think that that's something we necessarily have to worry about. I think the door-to-door confiscating of materials is probably a slim chance. It's not going to go very well. It's not going to be very smooth. They just don't have the willpower. What they can do is they can threaten you to turn in these items. They're probably not going to go to door because that's dangerous and that's just not very efficient. What they want to do is be in a centralized hub location of some sort and have all the resources come to them so they can distribute them elsewhere and do with them what they will. I think that they'll set up collection locations for resources if this should come to fruition. I'm not saying that it's going to. So I wouldn't be worried about them kicking your door in the middle of the night and taking your rice and beans. I don't think that's a thing. What they will do is they'll threaten you with possible penalties such as arrest, fines, all these types of things if you should be caught with these items. A historical example of this is when they were taking gold. So for example, I'll read it here. Under Executive Order of the President, issued April 5th, 1933, all persons are required to deliver on or before May 1st, 1933, all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates now owned by them to a Federal Reserve Bank, branch or agency, or to any member of the Federal Reserve System. So you are required by law, according to that, to turn in your gold. This was during the Great Depression. There was declared an economic state of emergency, and that's how they justified being able to round up everybody's money. They didn't care. Nobody cared about your story. They don't care how much you invested in it, how hard you worked to earn that. Nobody cared. They just wanted it because they needed the resources to do whatever it is they thought was necessary. So if you think that these types of things can't happen again, you are mistaken. They definitely can happen again. And whatever they deem necessary to keep doing whatever it is they want to do, whatever resources they want, whether that's food, gold, whatever, cars, doesn't matter. Whatever they need, they can take from you under the executive order, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't really matter. So it's a realistic thing to consider. I'm on whitehouse.gov right now, and I'm looking through the executive order on the designation to exercise authority over the national defense stockpile. And there's a whole lot of legal jargon in here and a lot of stuff that can be left up to interpretation, whatever that may mean to you. But basically what it's saying, I'll read a little bit of it to you here. Here's section 1, policy and purpose. The United States needs resilient, diverse, and secure supply chains to ensure our economic prosperity, national security, and national competitiveness. In Executive Order 14017 of February 24th, 2021, America's Supply Chains, I directed a comprehensive review of America's supply chains to ensure that they are resilient in the face of a range of risks. The critical component of safeguarding supply chains resilience and industrial base health is ensuring that both the federal government and private sector maintain adequate quantities of supplies, equipment, or raw materials on hand to create a buffer against potential shortages and important dependencies. So, decipher that however you like. Basically, it's the goal of the government to continue its economy and ensure that it continues to function the way that it always has. And it can use the resources that it has available to continue that. So is stockpiling illegal? No, it's not necessarily illegal right now in current times, but it could potentially become illegal to have something in excess of what somebody, authorities that be, deem that you can use in a whatever period of time. 1 week of food, 2 weeks of food, 3, whatever it may be, they can just make this stuff up. So it's a potential thing that could happen. Another thing that's a little bit disturbing is that the government has in the past encouraged people to tattle on your neighbor. So if you see that someone is hoarding something, whatever, again, that's left up to interpretation. If you see someone that's hoarding something, you can report that to the government so that the government knows where to go to get these resources should they need them. That's a scary, scary thing. That's some that's some Nazi level stuff right there, telling on your neighbor. So I don't condone that in any shape or form, for sure. One of the reasons that this was developed, these policies against hoarding were developed, was because people were taking advantage of a shortage. So they were if they had the opportunity, they would buy up whatever it is, the toilet paper. They would buy up all the toilet paper during the COVID nonsense. They would buy up all the toilet paper, and then they could sell it at a much, much higher cost than it was initially priced for. So they were taking advantage of a situation, of an emergency situation. You know, let's say there's a fuel shortage. Gas stations can't just hike their prices up to $40 a gallon and expect to get away with that. Now, I think that there's some room for debate on that. I mean, it's your fuel. I own a gas station. I can charge whatever I want for it at any given time, right? Maggie, what are you doing? Get down. Again, it would be one thing if you could trust the government to use its resources wisely. That would be one thing. It's a totally different thing if you know that they're going to blow it and waste it and use it recklessly, or for purposes that you don't support, whether that be morally or not. But getting back to the gas station thing, if I own the gas, if I own the fuel, it's mine. I should be able to sell it for whatever cost I feel appropriate. And it's people's choices whether they want to buy it or not. Now, I understand that people aren't prepared and they don't have reserves of fuel sitting around. And if they want to get from point A to point B, they should have thought about this ahead of time and know that there's going to be a fuel shortage. And they should have a few 5-gallon jerry cans of gas sitting around so they can get from point A to point B and they don't have to pay the $40 a gallon during this shortage. Now, there's lots of ways to look at this. I'm more on that side of it. If it's my gas, I can charge whatever I want, and it's people's option whether they want to buy it or not. Now, Should the government be able to step in and stop these types of things? I don't know. That's up for debate. You can leave that in the comment section if you like, but I think I know how I feel on that subject. And as far as like the gold confiscation and stuff goes, I think it's kind of, I mean, that's theft. I mean, that's pretty much all that is. That is theft. Is, requiring people to turn in their gold or else kind of deal, or sell it to the government at a very, very ridiculous rate. I think that is theft. And I don't think anybody with a brain would argue with that, regardless of what executive order has been signed or current state of emergency there is. It's theft. I think if I was faced with that situation, I would melt all of my gold bullion down. Not that I have any gold bullion. I wish I had some gold bullion. I don't have any gold coins or bricks or anything laying around here. But if I did, I think I'd melt it down into jewelry. I would turn it into a crown, because it specifically doesn't mention anything about jewelry. I would turn it into a crown, and then I'd be wearing it like a king. I think that's the way to deal with that problem. The message that I always want to get across to people is to not live their lives in fear. There's nothing to be feared, right? We can control only so much. There's only so much we can do with in our small little world that we live in. There's nothing we can do to affect the decisions that they make in Washington, D.C. Nothing we can do about that. But what we can do is be prepared. We can stockpile goods, and we can ensure that those things are protected if some sort of crazy executive order comes down upon us and wants the stuff that we have. What we can do is we can cache those goods. We can spread those things out, those supplies out. Don't advertise it to the public that you got this stuff going on. I'm making a big sacrifice here, big compromise by making these types of videos, and just being on a channel like this one is a big sacrifice, because obviously I'm a prepper type individual. So I mean, obviously I've got some food stored away for hard times. I don't sit on a mountain of food. I don't think that I don't think I need 5-10 years worth of food. If things have gotten that bad, we need to really be talking about producing our own food. That's a big deal to me. So I don't have a huge stockpile of food, nothing extraordinary at all. But I also take precautions by spreading that stuff out a little bit. Instead of keeping it all in one centralized location where it could be vulnerable, I spread it out a little bit. And I keep it in locations that are not as easily discoverable. So if you were to raid, if the government agency was to come raid my house, you're not going to find very much. It's not all in one location where it can be easily taken. So I think that these are things that we need to do to protect ourselves and protect our stockpiles. Easier said than done, I get that. It requires some work. But I think if you're going to take the time and energy to stockpile these items, like food, for example, you need to also take action to protect those things. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this stuff in the comment section. Please leave lots of comments for me. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. I'd be very grateful for that. Hit the thumbs up, and I cannot wait to see you on the next one. What are you doing? You are distracting. I'm Jason Salyer with Survival Dispatch. As a Survival Dispatch insider, you'll be able to gain the knowledge, the skills, and equipment necessary to protect your family when it really, really matters. They'll provide crucial information on such things as stockpiling food, medical necessities, communication plans. You will receive specific, actionable plans. You can deliver proven techniques to help you get home, shelter in place, or bug out safe.